Star Wars Andor has taken us to a variety of new or rarely seen places in the Star Wars galaxy, one of which is an institution often mentioned but almost never visited in popular Star Wars media, the Imperial Senate. Even though it's technically the ruling body of the Galactic Empire, the Imperial Senate is rarely relevant in Imperial-era Star Wars media, as most of the time, the Empire appears to be directly ruled by the military. In fact, most of what we see of the Imperial Senate, including of Andor, concerns its role as a reliable source of rebel leaders. From Bail Organa to Mon Mothma to Leia Organa herself, many of the Rebel Alliance's most well-known leaders were Imperial Senators. But why was this? Why was the Empire's own ruling body the leading source of rebel leadership? In this video, we'll be answering that question.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
If you forgot that the Empire even had a Senate, we don't blame you. The Imperial Senate was essentially powerless, and it existed only for a single purpose, which the Emperor himself put quite succinctly in a canon comic. Since my ascension, I have allowed a convenient fiction to persist, that the Empire is merely a continuation of the Republic. The Imperial Senate remains, an illusion of many voices coming together to govern. The Imperial Senate existed to perpetuate an illusion of a democratic system that, truthfully, had long ago ceased to exist. During the Clone Wars, the Senate had voted away much of its own power, and in the war's final days, it voted to approve a system of regional military governors proposed by the Supreme Chancellor's office. These regional governors, the Moffs, effectively took away the last of the Senate's power. During the reign of the Empire, these governor generals gave the Imperial Military, and the Emperor by extension, direct control over the galaxy. Most of the power formerly reserved to the Senate or to local governments was either handed over to or shared with these governors. In the cases where power was shared, the governors almost always won out whenever there was a dispute due to their control over local military forces, and as a result, the Imperial Military became the galaxy's de facto ruling body. But the Imperial Senate continued to exist, and it kept operating as it had under the Republic. On paper, it still had plenty of power, though its edicts were always either overruled by the Emperor or ignored by the Imperial Military whenever they didn't match the party line. It was responsible for important decisions now and again, however. In Andor, for example, we hear Mon Mothma talking about how the Senate cut shipping lanes to the planet Gorman, the future site of the Gorman massacre, which Mothma fears will lead to famine. The Senate did still have real power then, so long as its decrees fit the interests of the Imperial Military. When the Imperial Senate stopped following the party line, of course, it was dissolved by the Emperor. When the Imperial Senate was dissolved, Palpatine's official reasoning was that it had become a breeding ground for rebels, and he was correct in that regard. The founders of the Alliance to Restore the Republic were Senators Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, as well as Senator Garm Bel Iblis in Legends. Leia Organa, another key rebel leader, was also a former senator, and in Rogue One, we saw that Senators Noel Jebel, Vas Vaspar, and Tinra Pamlo were also members of the Alliance's Leadership Council. Indeed, the Rebel Alliance started out in the Senate long before the Galactic Civil War. The foundations of the Alliance were laid during the final days of the Clone Wars by Mothma, Organa, and fellow Senator Padme Amidala, who attempted to form a political coalition within the Senate in opposition to Palpatine's fledgling dictatorship. As those of you who've seen Revenge of the Sith's deleted scenes know, before the end of the war, these senators gathered enough support to present Palpatine with the Petition of the 2000, which demanded that he relinquish all emergency powers he had taken on at the end of the war. Of course, the Petition of the 2000 was ignored, and all the senators on it were arrested and disappeared after the rise of the Empire. But of the coalition's 3 organizers, only Padme had actually signed the petition. Mothma and Organa deliberately remained anonymous so they could continue to organize resistance if it was necessary. Even before the Empire was declared, they began covertly organizing more substantial resistance against Palpatine's rule, even as they played along with his ascension to Emperor. To quote the Revenge of the Sith novelization, Bail couldn't hear Padme over the din, but he could read her lips. So this is how liberty dies, she was saying to herself, with cheering and applause. We can't let this happen. Bail lurched to his feet. I have to get to my pod. We can still enter emotion. No. Her hand seized his arm with startling strength. No, Bail, you can't enter emotion. Fang Zar has already been arrested. and 200 daimya, and it won't be long until the entire delegation of the 2,000 are declared enemies of the state. You stayed off that list for good reason. Don't add your name by what you do today. But I can't just stand and watch. You're right, you can't just watch. You have to vote for him. What? Bale, it's the only way. It's the only hope you have of remaining in a position to do anyone any good. Vote for Palpatine. Vote for the Empire. Make Mon Mothma vote for him too. Be good little senators, and keep doing all those things we can't talk about. All those things I can't know. Promise me, Bale. Padme, what you're talking about, what we're not talking about, it could take 20 years. Are you under suspicion? What are you gonna do? Don't worry about me, she said distantly. I don't know I'll live that long. As the Imperial Age began, Mon Mothma and Bail Organa worked in the shadows, steadily building a rebellion while hiding in plain sight. Naturally, they roped in anyone in the Senate with rebel sympathies, which is why Alliance leadership was so full of senators. Mothma and Organa had easy access to other senators after all. But Mothma and Organa weren't the only rebel leaders running around during the Imperial period. There were many rebel groups that were completely unaffiliated with them, most notably Saw Gerrera's partisans. That's how rebellion usually works after all. It's something that's built from the ground up, not the top down. In fact, the vast majority of rebel leaders during the Dark Times had nothing to do with the Senate. But most of the ones we know of were, because they were the only ones who survived. The Empire successfully crushed most rebel groups. With the notable exception of the partisans, the only rebel groups that survived to see the Galactic Civil War were the ones who joined the Alliance. That's because the rebel groups with leaders in the Senate had something the others usually didn't: money and friends in high places. The rebel senators gave their cells the resources they needed to survive their fights against the Empire, and when the Alliance to restore the Republic finally formed, they gave the galaxy's scattered rebel cells something to rally around. Mothma and Organa spent decades building up the Alliance, drawing heavily on their political capital to funnel money and resources to their allies on the ground. This gave them the base of support they needed to form an organized, galactic-scale rebellion against the Empire. Local rebel cells joined the Alliance en masse out of necessity, and together they were ultimately able to wage a successful galactic civil war against the Empire. But again, these were just the rebel cells that survived. Many more never got in touch with the future leaders of the Alliance and died battling Imperial tyranny, bereft of allies and hopelessly outmatched. The Imperial Senate wasn't really special as a hotbed of rebellion. It was actually a rather proportionate representation of the galaxy as a whole in that regard. The Empire was brutal, and vast numbers of people hated it enough to take up arms and join the cause. This was true even within the Imperial Military, which was the second largest source of rebel leadership during the Galactic Civil War, giving the Alliance the likes of Jen Dodona and Crix Maydeen. It's said that the Empire ended up training more rebel soldiers than the Alliance itself did. What made the rebels in the Senate different was the power and resources they had access to, which resulted in a sort of survivorship bias. So that's why the Imperial Senate was such a hotbed of rebellion during the Imperial period. But what do you think? Are you enjoying Andor so far? Let us know your thoughts on the series in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.